Hello, everybody. I'm Anaji, and this is FMB Reviews. So today, I'm going to be reviewing highly anticipated movie by a lot of people, Godzilla versus Kong. I'm going to get right into it. I think this movie was fine. It was fine. I get a feeling that a certain part of the fan base is going to be upset. I'm not going to say which one. If I start getting the spoilers, I will say spoilers. And I think the movie is definitely biased towards. That's all I'll say. I'll say the movie's kind of biased. So when this movie got announced, I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't like super excited for it. I don't know. I don't know. I'll get into more of my feelings of why I maybe wasn't super excited. But I do want to say that this director Adam Wingard, I didn't actually know he was doing this at first until his name came up on the credits. Adam Wingard's kind of a guy that I would say within the last decade, he's been slowly coming up through the indie ranks. He had this really solid, the way I know him is he had this really solid thriller movie called The Guest, starring my boy Dan Stevens. And also he had I don't know if he directed this one, but I think he may have produced it. Maybe he directed it too, called Your Next, that I thought was pretty good. I think the reason I stopped kind of paying attention to him is that he had done the Netflix Death Note movie, and it was as a fan of the anime, it was not good. It was pretty bad. I would say for the most part in this movie, he did a solid job. You can see some of his tendencies. I'm noticing certain tendencies he has as a director. Like he really likes to put like 80s tinged kind of music in movies. Not exactly a problem, but I've already voiced how in some I'm getting a little tired of the 80s nostalgia, to be real. But I do think this movie has some interesting cinematography. There's some pretty interesting shots. It makes me think of this one sort of rolling shot that happens that I thought was pretty cool. And there's some shots that definitely inspire some awe. I wish the movie would hang on those shots a little bit longer. The awe shots, but I don't know. I'd be curious to know if there was some like behind the scenes stuff with this film. I think especially in the light of seeing something like a Snyder cut, I'm curious if there was sort of some tinkering going on. While I am glad to see Adam Wingard getting to do some bigger movies, I do wonder if his voice is getting kind of buried in that blockbuster machine, because I think he also did the Blair Witch sequel. I guess technically it's a sequel. And I don't really remember people reviewing it too well. So I wonder if it's one of those things where he's this indie director, he's got enough attention, and now the studios have snatched him up and they're sanding away the edges. The edges where sometimes the interesting parts could be. I also just wonder too, for him as a director, and this is more about the genre of like kaiju monster movies. I wonder how well these movies really work now. If they're not just something from kind of like a bygone era, because I think back in the day, it was more amazing to see like the original Godzilla or King Kong because they didn't really have CGI back then, so you were kind of limited in what you could show in a movie. But now with CGI, it's pretty limitless. I just don't think seeing these creatures is like quite as impressive anymore. And I don't know if that's just me, but I don't know if I definitely had a feeling watching this movie that I went, huh, maybe this is a genre from like a bygone era, or maybe we just need to start approaching these films differently. I think the original, not the original, the Godzilla from like 2014 tried to take a different approach. I don't think it was entirely successful, but I'm pretty sure that's how they got a lot of people's attention, was with that trailer with the people doing the Halo jump, and it was kind of a different perspective for a Godzilla movie or a monster movie. And I wonder if the genre may need something like that. But that's all I'll say about that. I do actually think this movie needed to be a little bit longer. This movie comes in under 2 hours, which surprised me because you have these two big monsters fighting each other. And especially after watching the movie, there's so many plots going on at the same time that I think they actually needed some extra time, maybe for it to even be 2 hours and 10 minutes or 2 hours and 20 minutes just to, I mean, if they wanted the movie to hit harder, but I get the kind of feeling when they were making this movie, they were definitely, and this is not a surprise, they're trying to make something that please the fans, that's crowd pleasing. I'm sure these movies are not cheap, so they're trying to get their money in returns and whatnot. But I think in terms for me, in terms of being like an effective movie that I was like invested in and will watch more than once, I won't probably be watching this more than once. But yeah, that's just my opinion, though. That's just my opinion. So I want to go into. Well, first of all, this movie has a really big cast. I'm not really surprised by that. I've definitely noticed after. I'm gonna say Godzilla King of Monsters that when I saw how many different actors I liked were in it, I definitely realized these movies are kind of almost like disaster movies a little bit from the 70s and whatnot. And there was kind of a revitalization of it in the 90s of just you have these big, have like movies like Volcano or Dante's Peak and whatnot, where it's just this big disaster. So you have a bunch of different famous actors who you don't need to have them all for very long. They're just kind of giving you different views and to draw interest into the movie. And this movie definitely has that feel. You have Millie Bobby Brown, you have Brian Tyree Henry, or better known as Paperboy. You have, I'm trying to think. Hold on. You have Rebecca Hall, but the only reason I ever really remember Rebecca Hall is the fact that I found out that she's like secretly half black. Man, she be passing. It has Peter. I think his name is Peter Skarsgård. Tall, handsome dude. He played Tarzan and whatnot. He's giving kind of a fun performance, a little bit, sorta. I think out of all these performances, I think Brian Tyree Henry's giving the performance that I like the most as this sort of conspiracy theory guy who is and starting to see that his conspiracy theories are like true. That was kind of fun to see, especially after because I've really only seen him play Paperboy, and these are two totally different performances. But I like to see that he does have range. And but I don't think this movie fixes the problem that I was scared was going to be in this movie, but unfortunately this movie does have it, which is the fact that the human characters are not interesting. I don't care about the humans. Not saying that it's not possible for me to care about the humans, but you can really tell when they made these movies that, and this will go into some of my critiques and whatnot, but that really the focus is on the not the focus is on the monsters, but they know that people are there to see the monsters, so I feel like they slack in terms of making interesting characters. But this will go into a bigger problem that I have later. So in terms of the human, I will say one of the first big problem I have are these human characters, right? Is that when you watch these kind of movies, even though it might say Godzilla, even though it might say King Kong, even if it might say Godzilla versus Kong, right? It's not as if those monsters are really the main characters, right? There's definitely a thinking, I think, in Hollywood where, oh, people can't really, you're limited to the monsters to a certain extent in terms of characterization. One, it's expensive to render them. You maybe don't want them on screen all the time because it costs millions and millions of dollars to render these creatures and have something for them to do. But also, too, they, like especially in terms of something like Godzilla, they lack maybe the ability to emote, which makes it hard for our audience to connect to them, right? So this movie, a lot of these movies, a lot of times I would especially say starting with Godzilla 2014, a lot of these movies have it where you're spending a majority of the time with human characters, usually a cast of human characters, which is unfortunate because when those characters are not interesting, that means there's a big chunk of the movie where I'm watching people and characters that I don't really care about. I'm just kind of waiting for you to get back to the monsters. So that is unfortunate. This movie has that. I didn't really care about any of the human characters. I mean, I know they have Millie Bobby Brown from the last movie and whatnot, but the fact that I'm calling her Millie Bobby Brown and not her character's name lets you know that I was not really immersed. I only know her for something else that she was more famous in and whatnot. And also, I would say that unfortunately, because these creatures cannot emote in certain ways, even though I will say Kong can actually emote and whatnot. Like he can give facial expressions. He can, because he's a primate. Like he looks kind of human like, so it's easier for us as humans to connect with him and whatnot. But a lot of times it feels like what happens is because you have these two creatures who are like the set pieces, but you can't do traditional storytelling things with them to a certain extent, right? They can't speak and whatnot. that you have the humans are almost there as just like exposition devices, right? So you'll have a scene where Godzilla shows up somewhere, right? And it's not as if Godzilla can like give a speech to the humans saying why he's there, whatnot. So you have it where whatever human characters there, Godzilla will show up, and then the human characters will have this very kind of unnatural dialogue where they're like, "What is he doing here?" He's like, "He's feeling territorial. He's the king of monsters." You know what I mean? It's like, but the way they're saying it is, it's like it's for us as the audience because they're going, these monsters can't really talk, but we got to give them some motivation. So that's their way of doing it. And unfortunately, I wish the humans were more interesting, especially if we're gonna have to spend so much time with them. That's why I think out of the three movies that came out before this, which was Godzilla, Kong Skull Island, and Godzilla King of Monsters, my favorite was Kong Skull Island because you, even though I wouldn't say the human characters are really engaging in that, the smart thing they have is that because Skull Island has so many different crazy dangerous creatures on it, you have it where at least the humans can do something, right? Like one of the big problems too with the humans is that once the action stuff starts really going down, the humans are just spectators. They can't really do anything, right? They're just kind of standing there watching the monsters fight. You know, we get reaction shots and whatnot, but they don't have anything to really do. While on Skull Island, because they had monsters that weren't as big as Kong, that the humans could actually fight back against, it made it where the humans had something to do. And that's why I think Kong Skull Island out of the three previous films is the one that I've actually watched that one more than once. And now I'm going to get in kind of to my, I'm going to say my, not my biggest criticism, but a criticism I do have. Of course, with these monster movies, they're set pieces and they're spectacles, right? You want to see big action scenes, especially if you're talking about a movie like Godzilla versus Kong, where you have these two iconic characters clashing up against each other. I will say the action is bombastic. There's some pretty crazy set pieces that happen in this and whatnot. But lately, a thing that I've been kind of going through is that I'm a big fan of this one person, Film Crit Hulk. It's this guy who pretends he used to do these blogs where he would write in all capitalized, pretending to be Hulk doing film criticism. And there's some of the most, I think it's affected my style of looking at movies and breaking movies down. Because after I read his stuff, it took my film criticism and analysis like to a different level. Some of his observations are just so good. And he's recently started a YouTube channel, which while I'm saying this stuff, if you want to check it out, especially this particular video I'm going to reference, it'll be here. It'll be here. And so he has this one video talking about the Mission Impossible series. And but basically what he's talking about in that video are the principles of action scenes. So in this video, he lays out how there are certain things that really good action scenes have, which I would say the Mission Impossible movies, even though they're different kind of movies, they have some of the most engaging action scenes I've ever seen. There's a reason why when you watch those movies, you're captivated. And so he goes through and he names these tenets of action, right? And the tenets are, you need clearly defined stakes. You need the characters to have objectives, things they're trying to accomplish. You need obstacles, things that will get in the way of those accomplishing their goals. Usually obstacles are things that the characters are aware of. Like let's say they're doing a heist and they're going, there's a alarm, right? Or there's a door, or there's a lock we need to get past. And then after that, you have wrinkles, which are problems that characters did not foresee happening. Usually in a heist movie, it'll be like, oh, this guard always leaves at this time. And then when they go to do it, the guard, not only doesn't the guard leave, there's extra guards there where they're going, oh crap, this is something we didn't foresee. And then lastly, you have outcomes, which is after going through the stakes, objectives, obstacles, and wrinkles, the outcome is basically after this action has happened, what new, because of what happened in the action scene, what action can the heroes take now? Like, let's see, did they succeed on the mission? Did they not succeed on the mission? Did they succeed, but they did it at a heavy cost? All those kind of things will determine where the movie's going to go next. So what I would say is ever since I've watched this video, which is about a month ago now, because I love action movies, like with the Marvel movies, right? Their action scenes don't really do much for me, and I couldn't figure out why. It's not as if their action scenes are badly done. It's not as if they don't have impressive visuals and whatnot. But when I watched this film crit video, I started noticing. I started taking action scenes and going through. Okay, what are the stakes? What do the characters want? What are the obstacles for what they want? Are there any wrinkles they're running into? And then what was the outcome for this? Now, it's not to say that most movies have at least a couple of these, but you really see why you need to have all of these. And I would say, unfortunately, this movie kind of suffers from that, right? Is as fun as it is, and don't get me wrong, I am being kind of critical, but I couldn't help but notice is like as fun as it is to watch Godzilla and Kong fight, right? At a certain point for me, it just kind of glazes over. You just kind of my eyes just kind of glaze over. I'm not really. I'm just like, oh wow, expensive CGI. Oh that's done really well in terms of CGI, but I don't feel anything. So if, when you have human characters that I'm spending a majority of the time with that I'm not engaged with, and then you have these action set pieces with these iconic creatures that I kind of care about, but I feel kind of after like a couple of minutes into the action scene, sometimes especially in this kind of movie, I just kind of check out, and I realized as I was watching it, I started doing the thing in my head. I started going, okay, what's the stakes of Godzilla and Kong fighting? Okay, what is Godzilla and Kong's objective in the scene? Okay, what are their obstacles to getting to the objective? What are the wrinkles? Okay, now that this fight is done, what's the outcome? And the movie has some of these, but I realized there were certain tenets of this that were missing, and I wondered if because they were missing, I wasn't being as engaged as much. And I think of a movie that is similar to this that I think does a better job than this though is the movie Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim does a fairly good job of having it where we're pretty clear about the stakes and the objectives and the obstacles and wrinkles and the outcomes in the fight. And also, Pacific Rim fixes the problem that most of these kaiju movies have in terms of the human characters because the human characters are not just passive bystanders. The human characters are directly in the action. They are directly there. So it makes it where watching them is more engaging. So yeah, that's just some of my thoughts. I don't really want to get too spoilery because I know this movie's kind of coming out in the middle of the week, so it's a little untraditional. But yeah, I would say with Godzilla versus Kong that if you're already a fan of these series, there's nothing I need to say to convince you or not convince you to watch this movie. But if you're just kind of looking for some early summer-ish kind of blockbuster, big spectacle action, big dumb spectacle action, this will do. So I'm gonna give this movie a. I mean, everyone's gonna joke on me about this, especially people who know me. But I'm gonna give this movie a 7. This is not really a high 7. It's kind of like it's okay. It's average. It's average in my opinion. Yeah. So hey, if you dug this review, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you've seen this movie, or if you disagree with me or agree with me, whatever, just put it down in the comment down below, and I'll respond to you. Until then, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.